Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our third edition of Stories for the Season. We are very excited to once again be partnering with NUCAT and State Street Theater to give you these readings of the season. This year, our theme, if you couldn't tell, is snow and snowstorms. We've got some wonderful fiction readings as well as true readings about storms that happened right here in New Ulm, firsthand accounts and newspaper clippings that we'd like to thank the Brown County Historical Society and their archives for letting us use those, and we hope you enjoy this year's Stories for the Season.
Hello, I'm Lisa Besmer. I'm going to read the story from the blizzard of 1873 from the recollection of Richard Fefferle. During the famous storm, which started on January 7th, 1873, I was living in New Ulm. The 7th was a very mild day, though cloudy. The snow had started to melt, and puddles of water had formed along the streets and elsewhere. Because of the unusual weather, people from the country had been lured to town in large numbers, most of them coming with teams. About 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a black, threatening wall of clouds was seen approaching from the northwest, preceded by smoke-like puffs. A few minutes later, the storm was upon us. At first, the cold was not severe, but the wind blew with such fury, and the air was so filled with dust like snow that it was difficult to breathe and next to impossible to see. Some of the country people, particularly those living close to town, started for their homes when they saw the storm gathering. Many of them had to turn back to town or seek shelter under strange roofs. Those from a distance had wisely not attempted to leave. In the city, all available buildings, like stables, carpenter and blacksmith shops, sheltered people and teams. Hotel accommodations were far from sufficient, and many a farmer found a night's lodging in a store. In the Mac School District, about 3 miles west of New Ulm, school was in session when the storm began. Mr. Mac's barn, near the edge of the timber nearby, sheltered the teacher and 27 pupils for the night, the parents being unable to make any attempt to get their children home until the following day. I remember hearing of one father who came with as many empty barrels as he had children to school. Into each barrel he put a child, covered the top securely with burlap, and in this way brought his little ones safely home. Reverend Alexander Burkhold, the local Catholic priest, had received a call during the day to administer the last rites to a dying girl whose home was on Wabasha Creek, about 30 miles northwest of New Ulm. He started on his errand with a bridal party, but got only 6 miles out from town when the storm struck the party and forced them to turn into the Anton Hanley place for shelter. They found the place crowded with unlucky wayfarers like themselves, and only the hired girl to provide for their comfort. Mr. and Mrs. Hanley had been caught in the storm at New Ulm. I do not believe the cold was so severe in this storm as it was in the blizzard of 1866, but in other respects there was little difference. The damage to livestock was certainly greater. In many instances, stables were literally filled with snow and the cattle smothered. In others, it was difficult to get to the stock to give them the required attention. I heard of many farmers who had to cut through the roofs of their barn in order to effect an entrance, and hardly anyone ventured out to feed his stock without tying a wash line to his doorknob so that he would be sure of finding his way back. 2 cases were reported where farmers, failing to do this, lost their lives. In fact, there were any number of strange casualties in our immediate neighborhood, and likewise any number of miraculous escapes from the fury of the blizzard. Near Madelia, a horse, ridden by a farmer owner, found his way home in the storm with a rider frozen stiff in the saddle. 3 O'Neill brothers and 2 Holdens, living at Birch Coulee, started for Wilmer on the first day of the storm with 5 loads of wheat. All of the teams and 4 of the men perished before they reached their journey's end, a fate which they might have avoided had they set out for New Ulm instead of Wilmer, as they naturally would have done had the price of wheat not been a couple of cents in favor of Wilmer. Reverend Burkhold, in his little book entitled Prairie Rosen, gives a graphic account of the tragic experience of these men as it came to him from the lips of the sole survivor, Mike Holden. An acquaintance of mine, a Mr. Morehouse, sought shelter during the storm along the banks of the Cottonwood River. Snow piled around him to the depth of 16 feet, but he emerged from this strange abode after 3 or 4 days without having suffered anything more than the pangs of hunger. A settler who had been out in the timber to get a load of wood unhitched his oxen, took hold of their tails, and depended on them to drift to a place of safety. It proved the most sensible thing he could do. A woman who had wandered around in the storm for some time finally reached a house and fell unconscious outside the door. The house dog saved her life. Sniffing at the door repeatedly and finally growling as he did so, he attracted the attention of his master, who opened the door out of curiosity. He found the woman and carried her into the house, where she was restored to consciousness and strength. Many more incidents I might relate, but these, it seems, should suffice to give a pretty fair idea of the general character of the storms of 1866 and 1873. The next storm is from the Review. It was printed on February 3rd, 1909, titled In the Grip of a Blizzard. It was the fiercest storm in 20 years, swept over Minnesota Friday. All day long, the wind raged at a speed of 50 miles an hour. Railroad traffic blocked till Sunday, wires down everywhere. A regular old-time blizzard, one of the kind you've heard tell about, swooped down upon the city Thursday night. Beginning with a warm rain Thursday afternoon, it turned into snow and sleet towards evening, and by 3 o'clock the following morning it had burst in all its fury. All day Friday it raged, the wind at times reaching a speed of 60 miles an hour. So blinding was the mixture of wind and snow that one could hardly see across the street. Fortunately, the temperature did not fall much until the wind had subsided, and there was little damage done to stock. In fact, the only stock loss of any consequence reported to the Review thus far was that of 22 head of sheep on the Stubbe farm northwest of the city. But railroad traffic was stopped immediately. So too was all telephone and telegraph communication with points outside the town. The Northwestern train, which left here for the west at 9 o'clock Thursday evening, only got as far as Lamberton and remained there until Sunday evening. The midnight passenger reached Sleepy Eye but could go no further. Not until Sunday was the track opened, and rail traffic was not resumed until late Sunday evening. On the Minneapolis and St. Louis Railroad, it was even worse. Here, no trains were run in either direction from Thursday noon until Monday evening. Beyond this delay in railroad traffic, the worst effect of the storm was in the damage done to telephone and telegraph lines. There was hardly a stretch of wire anywhere that wasn't affected, and in many places, pole after pole was snapped off like a straw. As indicating the extent of the damage, the Review had been informed that on one line between Cortland and New Ulm, there were 61 poles that were down. The New Ulm Rural Telephone Company estimates its loss at approximately $3,000. To meet this sudden drain on the company's resources, the directors held a meeting Monday afternoon and decided to raise the monthly rental 25 cents. The next storm was in the Review on February 3rd, 1909. It was titled Last Snowstorm, Worst of the Season. Nearly 80 inches of beautiful have fallen this winter. It's been here and gone. It was steenth and hoped to be the last blizzard of the season that swooped down on this part of the country last week and again tied up all railroad traffic, delayed the mails, and made everybody sore and disgusted with life in general. The storm arrived close on the heels of the previous one. It began snowing last Tuesday, continuing steadily until Thursday morning. Wednesday, a brisk gale added to the intensity of the situation and helped to pile the snowbanks much higher. There was a let-up during Thursday, but Friday the storm was continued with renewed vigor, and before the day had far advanced, it had developed into the worst of the winter, the snow being the heaviest, and with the 40-mile gale blowing the snowbanks were piled more than 15 feet in places. There has been practically no traffic over the Minneapolis and St. Louis Railroad since Tuesday. The Twin City Local, which arrived a week ago, is still here, having made but a trip as far as Winthrop and return, which was accomplished Thursday afternoon. There were no trains over the Northwestern from Thursday night until early Sunday morning, and conditions are not nearly normal yet. It is expected that it will be several days before either of the roads will have settled down to the regular running of passenger trains, to say nothing of freight traffic. Meanwhile, we are all patiently waiting for spring to arrive and do away with the snow blockades. The past winter has been one of the worst in many years in this part of the state. Up to the time of the last storm of a week ago, a little more than 70 inches of snow had fallen, according to official reports, and as nearly 10 have fallen since, the record for the past 35 years has been reached.